Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for joining our session called Development Horror Stories. Let me ask you something to you. Who's here? Who's the first time here on Oracle Code 1? Okay.
It's the first time of
That's the first time, of course. Exactly. But I saw a couple of people that didn't raise their hands, so let me try to do some calibration of the room. So who's here in the room? Okay, like maybe a couple of people didn't raise, so let's just say when I ask some questions, we'll count 90% of people to be 100%. So that's some calibration going on. Anyway, good morning. Thank you so much for coming. I know that you guys have some precious time, and we're happy to have you all here. So we're going to try to do a little bit interactive session with all of you, so please help us.
Wait.
What's up?
Wait. This is Roberto Cortez.
I will introduce us later.
Okay, cool.
That's fine. Yeah, it's Oleg. Now he's very corporate. He works on Oracle. Never mind. Yeah, he actually wanted to put here the safe harbor statement.
You have to do the introductions before the safe harbor
No,
slide.
it doesn't matter. Anyway, the reason why we are done with session is every time I came to like a conference, we always go and hear all the good things that happens on a session. You always hear everything is cool, everything is success. But we know that's not like that, right? And most of the software that we build also makes of disasters and things that went terribly wrong. And I think we can learn way more with each other's mistakes than actually what things that only went okay, right? So this is how it's going to be. We are going to, what's happened over here? Okay. My computer now, okay. So we're going to start and do a couple of our own stories and some things probably you also heard about. But we also want you guys to actually come in and step in and actually tell your story as well. So if you come here and be brave enough to come here and tell something that went terribly wrong with one thing that you did, we have a surprise for you. So we have a couple of T-shirts and a book we'll give away. And basically that's how it's done. So we did this like, I don't know, like 4 years in a row on Java 1.
And every year it's a great success. People come forward.
Yeah.
People are not shy. People probably use their not real names.
Yes.
But
and probably not their real companies.
But they tell stories about how they kind of managed to break the production environment or lose something important or made the
So no one has been to this session before, right? Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's step in and we'll warm things up so you guys figure out how this actually works. And well, maybe you can just come in and tell that's just a typo thing that you did. Maybe you just mix it up a label. I remember that we have a person came here, I think it was last year, and we didn't actually, I just remember this right now. Maybe it was last year. He was making like a filter on a web app that was selling movies, or actually like renting movies, I don't know exactly. But he messes up the filter somehow, that the first movies that were actually showing up on the web page were adult movies, which you may figure out that probably that was not really very good to the business. Or maybe you also heard that when YouTube was down, there was like actually a website that actually skyrocketed on web pages views. Can you guess which one it was?
Vimeo.
Maybe it starts with a P and ends with a B. Doesn't matter. So we had like a couple of other cool stories that we were told about. So I remember this other story. A gentleman came here, and that was like 2 years ago, and that person actually was working here in the U.S. working on military, and he was working on a military database or a military base, and was working with databases. And for some reason, and I don't remember the exact details how this happened, he actually deleted the entire inventory of that base. I mean, it's fine. You should have backups, right? Well, they didn't. The funny thing that happened later was they ended up to lock down the entire U.S. military database. No one could get in. No one could get out. I mean, we're talking about, of course, like tanks, ammunition, weapons, and they basically had to stay there for like 3 days until they redo all the inventory again manually. So we just hope that they got enough food to get in for the entire 3 days. And yeah, sometimes it takes some risk on what you're doing. Doesn't even matter. Oleg, I believe you have something to tell us.
I mean, this is not my fault. No, but the stories could be anything from, like, what we want to encourage here is participation, right? Like, you have experience that nobody else has, and the stories could range from something terrible and very expensive, like a couple of years or some time ago, where the people sent a rover on the Mars, and then that whole expedition collapsed and exploded in a spectacular cloud of failure because there were European and US-based engineers working together, and there were not enough documentation to realize that there are 2 different systems.
So that was Mars Explorer. Have anyone heard about the Mars Explorer issue, right? What was it?
So one.
I think it was foot-pounds versus newtons.
Sorry?
I think the unit conversion was foot-pounds versus.
Exactly. So basically, they couldn't agree on the units they were using, or actually, basically, they were using like a couple of softwares. One was using one system, another one was using another system, and of course, like this really small detail costs like billions of dollars, right? So that's what we live with.
Or it could be like a kind of less impactful story about how you broke something within the team and how your coworkers hated you for a while. Or maybe they didn't know that that was you, and you had a very interesting detective story.
Yeah, so I remember, and this actually happened to me like, I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago. I'm sorry. And this actually is one of my own stories. I was working a consultant job, and I was working on this big app. And we had like one of those random features that you develop to your customers where you have to notify someone about whatever. And for some reason, we made like the first deployment to production. And since we never actually tested that, the feature started to send emails like crazy. So after like 2 hours in production, the feature actually sent like 50 million emails. Of course, the mail server crashed like after 10 or so, and they lost the emails that they had for like 3 weeks or so. And the reason why what happened was, we remember when you usually say that no reply email? So our no reply email was set up as something that didn't exist. And then what actually happened was the mail server basically tried to send the email. That email didn't exist, and then basically bounced back. But then the other email server didn't have that email either, so it bounced back again. So basically, they were bouncing back from like ping pong, until time to live expired. It was 50. So basically, each email actually generated 50 emails. And of course, we have like multiple nodes in the mix. So basically, I believe at the time we had like 6 nodes. So you had like 50 emails, or one email generated like 50 emails plus 6 nodes. For like 2 hours, that's the account that we made, like 50 million emails that generated. So we crashed the mail server for customer. He was not really happy. We tried to figure that out. In the end, everything went okay. But I mean, I learned the hard way that you even like really small details you have to figure that out. And now every time that I have to set up like an email, I always go and at least say it's like a valid one. So. Hey man, my computer is, I don't know what's happening over here. But anyway, that's the stories that we wanted to tell you about, or at least the initial ones. Let me see what's happening over
Now it's
here.
your turn.
Now, yeah, so we would like for you to
come on stage,
come on stage and share your story. So do you have any volunteers? I know that you would like to tell a story. You
But
should
later,
have one.
later. We have
Okay,
people
a
who are
couple
actually
volunteers.
raising hands.
Please, lady over here, can you come?
Excellent. So we're going to vote on the success of the stories, how terrible they are later. So please tell your name,
Yes.
and then we'll...
I'm not sure, so. Can you please tell your name?
My name is Jim Boярski, and I work on in an unnamed bank in New York City.
Okay, there we go. Is that your real name?
Yes.
You can use a fake name if you want. That's fine.
It's okay.
Okay.
So I attended this last year, and I used a good story last year, but we did have something happen within the past year. Our team puts a lot of effort into psychological safety and making sure that one person can't bring down a server or do anything bad by themselves. So whenever we have a production change or anything that requires root, we have 2 people do it so that you're careful and you don't make typos. What we don't have is that level of fastidiousness for standard requests because they happen all the time, they're standard, they're easy, and they're well documented. Our entry-level person had one of those standard requests come in on the support queue, which was to delete a very specific artifact from Nexus. Real easy. You log in as an admin, you drill down to that artifact, you press delete, you press OK, you tell the user you're done. Well, it turns out on the wiki one of the steps wasn't that clear because he managed to delete the entire repository. He did do the step where you click OK to confirm that you know what you're doing. And then it was gone. And of course, being new, he was terrified. We were able to back it up. Everything goes to a trash/recycle bin. The effect of the outage was less than an hour, and I'm pretty sure that our team was the only one who noticed. But it was an interesting exercise in how to make the wiki clearer and not assume anything.
Thank you. So do we have any other volunteer? Yes, please. Please, sir, come over here.
All right, mine is super basic.
Sorry, what's
my
your
name
name?
is Ran,
Okay.
and so she's
Real name?
yeah, real name,
Okay.
but she's in unnamed bank from New York. I'm from unnamed electronic trading company in New York.
Okay. Do you guys work together?
Nope, she's in a bank, and I'm from the bad guys, more or less. More or less. But there is something called in trading. You connect to counterparties, you do a lot of cool stuff, and you connect to a lot of them. And one of our guys built a monitoring system, and for whatever reason, he coded that the maximum number of connection is 25. Why? No one knows. But he did that. And you would expect if you have 26, only his monitoring system will be impacted. And no, he brought the whole system down, and it took us 2 hours to connect the dot during the day that there is a problem here. So someone could not trade for 2 hours, which is millions and millions and millions of shares. And no one can do anything. No one could even think that it would be hard-coded to 25 on monitoring and will be bringing down a trading system. Lesson learned. Use check style and make magic number. It's a very, very powerful tool, and it will prevent anyone in your team actually making a constant. So that's the best lesson learned from it, check style.
Thank you, sir. Okay, who's going to be next? Please, sir, come over here. Don't worry, we have place to everyone. At least we still have time. Thank you, sir. What's your name?
My name is Zev.
Zev?
And,
Real name?
Yeah, it's my real name.
Okay.
This was at a previous company, so I don't really need to say
Oh,
it. But
okay.
we had done a, the owners had decided they wanted to do a big press release, and we're going to have a lot of traffic, and we were going to do a whole big site redesign at the same time. Lots of extra variables going into it. And in addition to that, because we were running our own data center, and this is before cloud computing, we were going to move to managed hosting. And I drank in the Kool-Aid, everybody's excitement, and so I said, oh, sure, we can do it all the time. And we talked to the managed hosting over and over again. It's like, here's our database traffic. Here's what we have to do right now. We want to scale to this level. So day goes to flip it. They didn't do any of the work to check it. My fault for not confirming that that really did do that. So our site was down for the whole day until we figured out and scrambled and said, look, you got to make sure you give us the right resources for the database to deal with the traffic that we had. So my lesson learned is when we moved off of them, I made sure that we split our traffic. So we had a shadow database running, and we would just send all the queries there and make sure that, you know, that system was tuned to the right way before we did the flip. But that was...
Thank you. Please, sir, come.
I may have to lower this too. My name's Asad. I'm just going to put my employee badge here. So this is on a different software system that I was working on, but it's not a horror story. It's more of a feel-good story. I was working on a time-off accrual system, and we were going for a monthly accrual system. And suddenly, we had some tests written that started failing in the month of January, and we were wondering, what's going on? Why is this monthly accrual failing? Turns out, we didn't encounter for something called a leap year. So the tests were basically off by 1, and that's how we caught it. It took us maybe a couple of hours to figure it out, but feel-good part, hey, write tests. They actually do catch these little things that you may forget. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm trying to pick people from previous rounds as well.
Okay.
So.
That one over there?
Yeah.
That, sir? Please, sir. Yes,
And
yes,
you will be
please.
next. Thank you.
We need to probably get like some, I don't know, some
Queue
blockchain,
system. Write a queue system.
some blockchain to give tickets away.
Okay.
Okay, so my name is James. I actually work at Autodesk. I'm not afraid to admit it. And at Autodesk, I end up doing a lot of, I've gotten a reputation for doing performance improvement. So I got called in to deal with a client that was very unhappy about the performance of their bill of materials, which we have as a directed acyclic graph in the database. But when we display it, we want it to be a tree so that you don't have a whole bunch of things all pointing to the same bolt on the web page. And for reasons that were unknown to anybody currently in the company, the original author decided to implement this in a recursive SQL statement. Anybody here know that SQL could be recursive? Because I didn't before I did this. And the problem was this client had one of the biggest bill of materials we had. It was the deepest part was 15 layers in. And it had hundreds of thousands of elements, and it kept quitting after 5 minutes because our database said no transactions longer than 5 minutes. So I teamed up with the DBA, and he said, let's change that to 45 minutes, and we let it run, and it got 5 layers in. And so I said, okay, do it for 1, and it took, a few milliseconds. Do it for 2 layers, double-digit milliseconds, 3 layers, triple-digit milliseconds, and then seconds, and then double-digit seconds. And at that point, I had enough to do a little analysis and realized that every layer was taking 8 times as long as the previous layer. And for 15 layers, it was going to take 137 years to finish. Now, I didn't actually manage to solve this one. The DBA I was working with solved it because he looked at the recursive SQL statement. And what it was the recursive part went through the database and layer by layer collected a list of all of the node parent pairs. And the second part selected the distinct elements of those to produce the tree. And the DBA just realized that by moving the word distinct from the second part to the first part, and so we select the distinct node parent pairs and then select the values from that, we got the performance down from 137 years to 75 milliseconds. Which is currently my record for performance improvements in a single attempt. So it relates actually to the errors in functional programming thing that I attended earlier this morning. Order of operations matters. Filter down your stuff before you build up a list, because we just do not have enough storage for 137 years worth of collected node parent pairs.
Okay?
You can pick the next one.
Yeah, that's fine.
So thank you. My name is Michel Schiedel. I work for a Dutch IT company called Craftsman. And in the early 2000s, I was working at a healthcare insurance company, and we had to do a database conversion on Friday afternoon. So we had all the conversion done and tested in acceptance and stuff. And yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's better?
Yeah.
Okay. So we started the conversion, and our manager said, well, let's go to the pubs, it's running. So yeah, so if the manager says, let's go to the pub, who am I to argue, right? So we went to the pub, and of course, we got back around 12 o'clock at night, and the script just had crashed at the first step, of course. So basically nothing had happened for like 4 hours. And I had a few beers, so I said, well, okay, I'll fix it, no problem. Just started the script back again, and went home, and went back on Saturday morning. And well, actually, the script was basically a conversion for notifying customers of these health insurance companies that indicated they wanted to have STD information. So everyone knows what STD is? No? Sexually transmitted disease. So this message would go to their MDs, and they would contact their patients. But I forgot the where clause. So basically, I think maybe a few thousand, 10,000 people got a really strange call on Monday morning by the MD. So that's my failure. Thanks.
I don't think I can beat that one, though.
Let's try.
So, hi everyone. My name's Tom Coles. It's spelled Cools, but I'm not that cool. And when I was a junior back in Belgium, I worked for a financial institution for the very first time. And we actually made a component that every API call that came into the bank had to go through our component, and we would do validation. Is this person allowed to do this? So we had a very strict performance guideline, so we did performance tests a lot. And as a junior, I was pretty smart. I realized that I shouldn't be running performance tests on the same machine that my app server is running. So I asked my colleague, hey, can you run it? It's fine. And we were really not getting the performance metrics that we expected. So this is a tale of idiocy, because after a while we realized, oh shit, we're on Wi-Fi. Then about an hour later, things weren't improving, and then I realized, oh shit, my laptop's also still on Wi-Fi, so we connected those, and then we got decent metrics. The second part is actually kind of worse. We found out where the problem was. It was somewhere in a library in the app server that wasn't handling the threads correctly. So they flew over a consultant for that app server, which will not be named. And basically, this is a horror story of something I was that was said to me. And I told him that I know where the issue is, like update this library in your app server and you will be fine. And he told me, I'm not going to do that. Can you please take the library out, decompile it, fix the issue, and recompile it and put it in the app server again? This is like, for me, this was the most amazing, creepy thing that was ever said to me, because we paid this consultant like 50,000 euros for a week. So that was kind of strange. And the last part was when we actually fixed it. Remember, financial institution, I ran a performance test on production by accident, which is not a big deal, as long as you don't forget to actually tell the security guys that you're going to run a performance test on production, so the bank actually thought they were being DDoSed. So.
Thank you, sir. Okay, please.
So my name is Garpur. This is something that happened about 20 years ago, I think. I killed a production database, deleted it. There were no backups. It was a really bad week. What happened was that we were running Informix, and I was doing a upgrade something to resize the database, and it has a flag that says ON init -I think. And you get this little yes, no, that your data will become unavailable. Yes, I know, it will be offline while you're doing it. No, it will become permanently unavailable. They didn't say that. So I did that, and then there was no data in the database. Okay. Please put in the backups, I need to restore. There were no backups. Another company had set up the backups for that particular customer. They were not backing up the database, they were backing up the operating system. The good thing about it was that it only cost them like 2 days of data entry to get back on track because they were running weekly collations to a central server. So it was distributed, and so every week they'd send the monetary information to a central server, which would then send out bills. They were not very happy, and they spent a few nights entering the data again. So I have killed a production database. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir, please.
My name is Yuri. I work for some company in Silicon Valley. And this story happened this year. So we were in Google Cloud and running 2 Elasticsearch clusters, like most people do. So one in production, one in standby. And production serves real traffic and standby. We run some analytics. While if somebody bad happens to production, we can easily switch traffic and say, hey, analytics, go out. So at some point, analytics comes to us and say, data is our queries is really slow. What the hell happening? And looking at Elastic and say, okay, for some reason, index is redefined. The thing is, you cannot redefine index while it's been created. And digging down, okay, there is data is not full there. What happened? Clusters should be in sync. What the hell happened? Why data is not in sync? And we dig in deeper and figure out somebody deleted all data in standby cluster. And we try and figure out who did this. And it's production, project in Google, everything's good. Somebody's deleted the cluster. Why? And we spent some time trying to figure out who actually did this. It turns out that analytics were in separate project in Google. Security guys say, okay, production is a separate project, analytics, everyone else is another project. An inter-project connection is a pain in the ass. So people said, we're just going to open the port to the public and access it. Everything works fine until there is some script in the wild who checks standard Elasticsearch port and just issue drop. And that's it. The thing is, we also have a flow constantly updating. So update says, okay, there is no index. I'm just going to create it. That's how Elastic works. Just no index, I'm going to create it with default settings. See, that's how we got all data out of sync. And some lessons learned don't open ports to the public, do authorization, basic one at least.
Okay. Yes, Spor, in the back.
Hi there, my name is Ali, my real name.
Okay.
But this is a unnamed restaurant company that has restaurants all over the U.S., some international, but so I was in my second or third week at the company, and I had just gotten my laptop finally ready, and sorry, is it better? Okay. I just got my laptop finally ready. Everything was kind of working fine. I was just getting to kind of know the database a little bit. Everything was all good. And then all of a sudden, we had a crash. Nobody could make reservations. So we're talking about people who, these restaurants are $40, $50 check averages. So it's a critical situation. We had so many teams looking into this. But the fun part is when you're with a big corporation is every team says, oh no, it must be that team over there. The other person's then they're gonna try to fight and go, no, it's that team over there. Yeah, you gotta talk to them. Then you have hours and hours in between meetings, and it was getting crazy. Well, I started doing some research. Well, we ran into Christmas. Nobody could work. Everyone was just kind of okay, we'll deal with it after the New Year's. The only workaround we had was they actually built an iframe, and they put in our mobile site. So basically, people were using our mobile. So anyway, to make a long story, really long story, kind of short, after a couple of weeks, we find out what happened. So someone in IT, in the actual networking side of it, was a little bit newer, and he was tasked with testing this new safety feature that recognizes denial of service attacks. Well, there was a little button that says recursive, so I mean you check all the sites underneath the main sites, and all those sites happen to be the sites where there were reservations. So every time the system ran, it basically pushed all kinds of different tests to these reservation sites. All the reservation sites basically got in there and said, wait, we're getting attacked. So they blocked the IP, which is all coming from our headquarters. The only reason mobile worked was because our mobile site was completely run off-site by another third-party source. So yeah, a month and a half later, after they lost probably millions and millions of dollars, we figured out it was that one new IT guy that just clicked the check all the other sites below our main site. So, but we got it. We resolved it. But anyway, that's kind of the craziest horror story I've heard. Thank you.
Yes, sir, please. Still have a few minutes left, so.
Hello, my name is Grzegorz. This is why I'm not afraid to say it publicly, because you won't be able to pronounce it anyway. So, a few years ago, we were developing a custom software for a company that was doing kind of media planning, advertisement planning. And they had their own system hidden behind the Microsoft firewall. It was very hard to access. So we had serious problems deploying new versions of our software. And it was very crucial for us to deploy fast so that users can actually see what's going on so that they can test it. So we figured out with this crazy plan to set up a very basic CI in their company. That pretty much involved setting up one single Jenkins instance that would build code stored in their own repository. There were some policies that were limiting that. We couldn't do this from ours. They needed to have code in their space, and this would be built and deployed so that they can play. So it took us a few months to actually talk with local people to get all security passes and so on. They had problems installing the Jenkins, so we wrote them a script that would have like 5 lines of code that could do that. They did it. It's been running fine for 6-7 months. Everyone's happy. Suddenly, the Jenkins instance disappeared. We can't deploy anything, and that person that was setting it up in the past doesn't work here. So what happens? We just keep running, asking questions. Where's the instance? And no one knows where it is. And it's been going on for some time. And then it appeared for some short period of time. It turned out that the person that was setting up the CI did this on his own laptop. And it's been running fine for half a year. Then that person got fired. And when the person got fired, the Jenkins instance disappeared. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Please, sir, in the back. Then you come next. Yes.
Hi, everybody. My name's Richard, and work for a large government contractor, and this is a very sad story about your tax dollars at work. For those of you who are not from the U.S., this does not apply to you, but I worked on thank you, sir. I worked on a large project that spanned over 25 years. $9 billion went into this. And right before we came to the culmination of all of this thing, there was supposed to be a report. The manager of the project asked me to come in and take a look at their configuration management program. Okay, sure. So it turns out their idea of a configuration management program was putting some code, some software on a CD and putting it in a filing cabinet when they're done with it. Okay. This project started in 1975. Okay. So when we came to the point where we had our report to deliver to our customer who had given us $9 billion, and they asked us, can you validate this result for us? And my boss comes back to me and says, Richard, we need this code to validate this. I go, okay. Find me a computer with a proprietary operating system from 1978. That we can't find it, that doesn't exist anymore. None of this code had been maintained or updated in over 40 years. And so after $9 billion, when our customer asks us to validate a result of a calculation, you know what we had to tell them? That, oh, I'm sorry, we can't do that. You're going to have to take our word that this was done correctly all these years ago. We can't reproduce this result. We have the software, we just don't have an operating system or the hardware to run it anymore. That's been, that hardware, that's been gone for 30 years. Sorry. Your tax dollars at work. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
Please, sir. No, I think it was a sir. Was it you? Who was the ran? Yeah, yeah. Okay, sorry, I didn't know if it was you or was it sir in the back. Yeah, sorry.
So my name is Carl, not my real name.
Okay.
So I took notes. I work for another government agency which has offices, more than 200 offices around the country. We have a website, and the software has been around for about 30 years, and it has hundreds of millions, in fact, a little more than 1 billion documents in it nationwide. But each of these 200 offices runs a complete copy of the software. So we have more than 200 plus production deployments of this software. And so in a recent upgrade, we introduced web services that have hand-rolled pagination. So we're not using a framework to automatically limit the amount of results that come back from web service calls. So it, most of the time, works great. So we didn't have any problems with the first 40 or so offices we deployed. We didn't have any problems in testing. It was never a problem for internal users. It was only a problem that happened with certain external users in one of these offices. And what would happen is all of a sudden our servers would completely come to a crawl. And this was right after an upgrade with the really busy days, right? And the RAM was completely gone. And so we learned, you know, in this kind of environment, it's really important to have pagination. And because it's an intermittent failure, it took us days to figure this out of up, down, up, down, up, down. And, you know, in addition to the problem that we had and the loss of productivity and all the uptown and downtime and all of that, because we were deploying this in so many different offices, and because of part of our debugging was actually add more RAM. And that does actually fix the problem. You know, 100 gigs of RAM later, it does actually fix the problem. So then the other 160 offices waiting in line all want another 100 gigs of RAM because we didn't have pagination in the framework. So think about that from the beginning.
Okay, I think we have room for one more. Do we have one more? No?
Would you like an ops disaster story?
Sure.
Those are the best ones.
This actually isn't my story, it's my partner's story. She worked at a gaming company in Toronto, and they had to retire a server that was being hosted in Curacao in the Caribbean. So they sent their Windows monkey down because they could spare him. Send him down to Curacao, and then what you're supposed to do is go to the building, turn off the server, go to the beach, have a pina colada, and wait for somebody to complain if something went wrong. And then go back to the hotel, have a nice night's sleep. Next day, come in, go to the building, put in the software to delete everything, go to the beach, have a pina colada, listen for the phone to ring, go back to the hotel, come back the next day, take out the machines out of the racks, go to the beach, have a pina colada, and so on and so forth. But the first day he was down there, Lori got a call saying, we just lost a major block of production. And she was saying, okay, which block? And they said, you know, such and such, these games, whatever. She said, okay, those are hosted in Curacao. Somebody get me Doug on the phone. I think he may have gone into the wrong building. Because the company had hosting in 2 adjacent buildings. They shared the same parking lot. And he'd gone into the left building where the production was, instead of the right building where the retired production was. And he'd walked up to it, put in the software to delete everything, started it running, and went to the beach and had a pina colada. So they got him on the phone. They told him to get back in the building, shut down the software, and not touch anything else until he got further instructions.
And go to the beach and have a pina colada.
No, they told him to go to the hotel and wait for further instructions. Unfortunately, it also turned out that he was a little unstable. He boasted about the fact that he'd put a GPS tracker on his ex's car just to keep an eye on them. And when he got called up for the debriefing to figure out what went wrong, instead of showing up at the debriefing, he apparently packed up all of his stuff and left the building. And my partner spent about the next week worrying that he was going to come back with a shotgun or something because he seemed the kind of guy who might. Fortunately, that never happened. Unfortunately, HR had never documented any of the other things he had done, so they couldn't fire him either. But he ended up quitting shortly after, especially when he came back to work after having disappeared and discovered that on his desk, someone had put an action figure of Shredder from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that had stuck as his nickname ever since.